Welcome to another episode of the Exertis Broadcast Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Smith, flying solo today because it's Friday and everybody's busy catching up with work, but that's okay because I replaced my normal team with somebody really fun and special. So everybody, I want to introduce you all to Mr. Chris Burgos from NewTek. Give us a warm, there it is. All right, Chris.
How's it going, Nick, man?
Oh, good, dude. I'm so happy to have you on. This is fun. I mean, you were the first person on LinkedIn who said like, that looks like fun. Can I do it? And I'm like, oh, heck yeah. Absolutely want you on.
I want to do every podcast that we could be on. I want to be in touch with everyone and be talking about what we do at NewTek, and also just like get like these intimate moments. I think podcasting is so different than like, I mean, you and I know each other for a while now from a business perspective, and typically we're all like buttoned up and talking to customers, and we have our time and maybe we catch a dinner or something, but you know, you never really get time to kind of like geek out in a way that's like what this is, and then what I'm looking forward to.
No, I mean, I think it's to me, it's fun. And also we want to change the conversation. I mean, so many of like the webinars and everything are just like a PowerPoint nightmare, right? And it's just like, hey, here's our latest eye chart. Look at it with us. And I'm like, you know what? Let's stop. Let's talk about the technology in a passionate, fun way. And, you know, if we look at consumers right now, everybody's podcasting, everybody's viewing content, or, you know, and I'm beginning to see sort of the video podcast come back, right? There was a season there where it started with video, it rolled to audio only. It's huge. That's like the mainstream, but I'm starting to see more podcasters come back to video as a staple piece of, hey, if you've got time, watch it. If you don't, listen. Right. And so we kind of, you know, that's kind of our roadmap right now, but it's just changing the sales conversation from, hey, watch my PowerPoint to, hey, jump on this conversation and listen. Right. This is way more fun.
I think it also gives us lots more personality too. I mean, we know each other really well, so we'll bounce off and we vibe, but you get to know more than just the cold presentation. Like you said, the PowerPoint is reading the facts, and this is a conversation where, you know, we can sort of express a little more of our personalities, and that'll come through. You
know, that's a huge point, because the way I feel it is behind every manufacturer, there are humans. And those humans are the ones that are making the decisions and designing the products. And you know, like you talk to Dr. Cross, he is so passionate about education and kids learning how to produce and tell stories, right? And it doesn't even have everything to do with video production, but it's just teaching them how to tell stories because of how that impacts their life, right? And you wouldn't hear that from him if you didn't say, let's talk about technology and not about NewTek, right? And then you find these things out about him and you're like, oh, that's amazing, right? So I love the fact that we can humanize the people behind the technology, right? And best way to do it is right here on camera. All right, so let's jump into you for a second. So how long have you been at NewTek? I mean, you've been around NewTek almost all your life?
Yes.
I mean,
I would say most of my adult life I've been around a TriCaster in some capacity, but NewTek specifically a little over 6 years ago. And I know I can track when I joined NewTek with when NDI sort of came to fruition, because I sat in my first meeting at NewTek in San Antonio was a large scale meeting because NDI was being released. And I sat in with a lot of people who we've known through the years in and around our projects, all in the same room, listening to the first NDI pitch. Nice. So one of my first times at NewTek, I'm hearing Dr. Cross talk about this IP technology and where we're sort of coming from with IVGA. And I'm just like letting it all sink in and go a layer deeper. And like, I sit back and I literally make like the mind blown, like explosion idea, because I'm just like, there's so much that can happen. And so, you know, I joined NewTek officially that time, but I've been doing freelance work. I've been doing, I sold systems for a little bit. You know, I've been working with the product since pretty much post college. Nice. So I would say that's like, a little over 10 years.
So, I mean, literally you're going to, you know, I mean, however many years from now, you're going to step back and go, I was there when. Right. It was like, I was there for the launch and the birthplace of NDI.
When I was watching your guys' coverage of NDI 5 and Bridge, I was like, yeah, this is the realization of that day one conversation. When that day one conversation happened, it was always to get to that point where you could take any NDI device anywhere, literally anywhere, and connect it to any NDI device anywhere else. And like, it's like Bridge was that. And there's just that moment when you touch it, that I think I was making jokes online. You kind of feel like Thanos, like the Infinity Gauntlet is complete. Like I have everything. Like I can just do whatever I want in a snap. It's that feeling is amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's a great reference point to it, right? It's all the power in my glove. Well, you know, it's crazy too, because you look at like the past couple of years, we've been sort of begging for this for bridge, right? It's like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And I've got manufacturers that, that I work with. There's dozens of others in the industry that all built ways to get around bridge to solve the problem that bridge just sort of came in and said, check this out. It's like, mic drop, because it's like now, anybody with a PC with a minor GPU can suddenly be like, hey, catch this stream, right? It's like we're in. Yeah. And when you look at the other players on there, it's like so many of those other styles of transmitting data of like, oh, well, you have a VPN connection you can turn on to do camera control. And you're like, yeah, Bridge has got it. You just got to turn on Bridge, right? And it's like, but if you configure the IP address correctly, and it's like, no, just turn on Bridge and we're done. Just literally done.
You can turn on Bridge and open any chat app, copy and paste the necessary information. Like we set the technical bar so low in executing with Bridge. And I think that was kind of by design. You think a lot of the stuff we do in IP, it's like we're watching these things, like we learned from the past, right? We learned from a lot of the solutions that are out there, either in our space or sort of just on the side of it. I think of like what SRT is doing. SRT is amazing, right? And SRT deployments in the field have been sort of like kind of pushing on where a gap in where something like Bridge wasn't there before it could solve it. We get that SRT connection, we set our parameters right, and we send one feed out, and it's pristine. It looks amazing, and that gets us a lot of functionality in the field. And then I look at where we started doing things with Bridge, which is like, well, we're just going to enable 2 NDI nodes, and then just like take NDI node A to B or B to A, and then anyone who joins this node can kind of interact with each other. It's just a very different way of looking at it. And we gain the benefit of being like software focused, of being engineering focused, and looking at everyone sort of what everyone's doing, what we're trying to accomplish, and saying, hey, this is Bridge. And so you do have that aha moment when you're like, I could do another pathway, but oftentimes Bridge just gives me so much more that, and I could compress it down if I really don't like it. Like, you can do a 1 megabit Bridge, and it's just like, those things are kind of like really cool to just watch. And again, I have that perspective for 6 years now of watching NDI develop and grow and watching our products change and watching the industry adopt it. I think we're going to get to that in a little bit, but just, as I'm watching this and I see the Bridge come out, I'm like, there it is. The answer technically can go NDI to NDI. It just, maybe it's through us or a third party or something, but you can probably make your solution work entirely in NDI now.
No, agreed. Now it's funny you mentioned third party, because should be a good transition point, everybody. If we go back 5-6 years at that launch, you had sort of the industry snub their nose and say, well, no, you're not doing this right. You're not SMPTE 2110 or whatever the flavor of the week was back then. Was it Ames? Was it Aspen? What was it? Who knows? But it was like, so the industry kind of like, you're not doing it correct. You need $1 million, a 10 gig network switch. You need like all this big infrastructure. Now you're doing it the SMPTE way. And it's like, look, I'm not going to knock SMPTE for what they did. It's perfect for massive broadcasters, for those huge environments where I'm, running 27 channels or, whatever it is. But it wasn't accessible. It wasn't realistic. Right. And then, so their answer was to come out with a more compressed version of, the 2110 that could operate on a 1 gig pipeline. You're like, well, why? NDI is right here. So it's funny. So, so I take that and I say, okay, you had all these manufacturers that kind of went, nah, we're not going to touch that. That's for the small players. Right. And then suddenly manufacturers like Grass Valley and Ross and others and AJA now have NDI enabled products, right? AJA with their converter, that multiple in, multiple out, Ross with a new camera and a way to get it into their mainframe, Grass Valley with a camera. And so all these companies that originally said no, do you think, if we look at this, were they forced into this because the market moved around them, or was it just like join or die?
I want to take a step back, because for us, right, the conversation with like SMPTE or the few other competing IP standards, for us, it was always like, we look at it all advantageously. More people doing things in IP, we needed to get there. So every company developing IP standards, we knew that meant that the focus was going to shift to mostly IP. So we didn't see them as competitors. We all saw that as a benefit. And there were certainly people who wanted to go the SMPTE pathway. And like you said, like the SMPTE pathway solved what those high-tier broadcasters really needed to solve. And it worked IP in a way that they understood. So I'll always be happy that existed, because in the interim, we made NDI for church, our church volunteers, middle schoolers and high schoolers, somebody who's never touched anything in IP and wants to make it work at your board, your local government, a teacher, an admin. So when we did that, that's when sort of we made our play, and that's why a lot more people got exposed to NDI. It was just, there was a PTZ, there was a Spark, this thing has bunny ears, like all these like sort of like we sort of shifted our focus. And then to speaking to what you're saying, I can speak very directly. Before NDI existed, which was about that 6-year time frame, NewTek had in totality 75 third-party partners. If you included everybody who made a product that did something with NewTek, and some of that was freeware and some of that was hardware and software, I want to say we stopped keeping count after it hit 6,000, and that was somewhere in like the 4th year of NDI's existence. So someone knows at NewTek, and someone at VizRT Group can pull up the number today, but there are so many manufacturers, let alone individuals, who have now adopted this thing. So I don't think those guys are necessarily forced. I think the saturation of this has changed.
Yeah.
You can draw the same analog with like what Zoom sort of growth in the pandemic era. Prior to that, Zoom was a cool technology that a lot of people didn't touch. And the fact that Teams is here and is as widespread as it is, like this product is what's making sense today. And NDI was going through generations and gaining momentum. And then finally the sort of bubble burst, and everyone's like, we all need to do IP. And why not doing it with one of the coolest tools out there? Oh, by the way, it's free in Teams. Oh, by the way, somebody made a third-party Zoom application that does it. Oh, by the way, the company who makes it continues to iterate on it. So, it's a really easy bet to place. And I'm glad that they're with us. We want everyone to be on this IP train.
Now, and it's interesting because on the Pro AV side of the world, right, we've got, a lot of different IP codecs and formats, and they all sort of exist on the same network switch, right? And so to think that in the broadcast world you couldn't have something beyond SMPTE that enabled, and it's funny because even if I step back in your conversation, you said like we made this for churches, we made this for schools, and it's like, however, I'm fielding calls from major broadcasters who are like, hey, how do I deal with 120 NDI signals and manage it all? And I'm like, wait, you're who? And you have how many? I'm like, great, I love the sound of this, right? So while your target was like modern America, it's the broadcasters kind of saw this as hey, this is really cool. We can use this. You guys have 30 Rock and some really great clients that are, big clients that have got massive NDI infrastructures.
I remember when I think it was 125 was the high mark. It was like when we encountered a facility that had 125 NDI streams. And you're like, that has been dwarfed since then. And I think the truth of a lot of that stuff is just like you and I are guys who dig into tech and we're reading articles on the weekends, and like this is stuff that we really want to get interested in, and if we find something, we'll take our time and look into it. There were individuals in so many of those organizations, we try to think of them as monolithic, but really there's lots and lots of people just like you and I in there, and there was opportunities where someone said, I'm going to take a gamble on this because I keep hearing good things, and also like most of the testing I could do for free, and then that started into somebody calling you out of the blue, and they're like, hey, our entire ecosystem is based on NDI, and we're a major player in our state or in cable television news or something like that. It's been really cool to just watch that evolution, especially considering, I think you're right, a lot of people looked at us 6 years ago and were like they weren't necessarily as convinced, and luckily enough we keep making the thing better.
Yeah. So
there's get on the train today, and you can ride and watch us grow, or in 3 years you can join us and say, man, I should have been doing it 3 years earlier,
No, it's insane to see even now that it's, we've got so many Pro AV dealers that are coming in going, NDI, how? What, like, we want this. We want to do this, right? And so we're on a conversation recently with a customer. It's like they have an NDI camera and all they want is a decoder so they can feed it to a lecture capture system. And it's like they've now seen NDI as an infrastructure piece to allow them to more easily control and move the content without having to manage a bunch of APIs and big, third-party control systems. They're like, look, I can slap a camera down, I can plug in one cable, I can put this decoder over here, and now I can control that camera, and we're lecture capturing people. Look at this, right? It's just so it has moved itself into so many venues because you guys continue to iterate on it and like you said, make it better. So you just said something crazy, which is we continue to iterate, we continue to change and grow it. So with that being said, let me make the best pivot of all. Big announcements just happened. New products, new features, like all kinds of great stuff. So let's start with what came to the TC2 Elite. Like what were the big changes that just got announced for the TC2?
Man, there's so many that it's stark in a way that we have a product that's a year and a half out in the market, and now we're giving it just a glut of new features that really comes from users. And so right off the top, we have improvements to Live Call Connect. Live Call Connect now supports things like FaceTime, things like Facebook Messenger, and I think the sort of crown jewel of all of that is WhatsApp. You know, those things are so widely used in so many scenarios. And we think about what Live Call Connect does for ease of getting people in. Well, more ways to say, hey, you're on what platform? Yeah, we can do that as well. So I think that's the major one. Some really cool ones underneath the hood that I think you have to really get an appreciation for. The new macro system with the conditional state macros, where I can build a general purpose macro panel that just observes what ME I'm on. I don't have to build a macro panel per ME. And this is like really high level talk, but if you want to create a multi-purpose panel and you have, brand new users, brand new people in your environment, you just got some new hires, well, you can give them all the power in the world without having to create this really custom panel. Or you can work with NewTek and we'll create like this really awesome flexible panel that's all software. Like you catch it on your laptop, you can catch it on your tablet, catch it on your phone even, and control the system. So Macro 2.0 is another big one. The audio neural analyzer, man, what an improvement in audio when that thing gets clicked on. So there's a lot of cool features that have come to the TC2, and it's just like, what a gift. I think, right, like thinking about Santa coming around, like we have the holidays coming up. It's just like, here we go. We are updating these systems in such a way that like your ability to produce has just grown, and your ability to make this stuff sound and look better has also become that much stronger.
No, and the one that actually was I think a very small one, but really powerful for us was the Genlock capability in NDI, right? So being able to synchronize multiple cameras, being able to, kind of everything locked, because we're seeing a huge influx of XR opportunities with extended reality where people are standing on LED sets rather than standing on green screen. And one of the pieces that's needed in that to synchronize the back plates, the foreground, everything is Genlock. So to me, this like immediately says, okay, XR, NewTek, we're in, right? And I'm like, sweet. I'm all about Mandalorian production right now. So
you're looking into the crystal ball, Nick, and I think your eyes are set with a lot of knowledge. We have that new NDI SDK where that sort of paid tier for those developers who want to get the latest and greatest. And I think this NDI Genlock concept is one of the first things to sort of mature out of that. Yeah. There is so much being done in NDI, to your point earlier, about just so many people working with us, that I think it's going to be interesting that we continue to see these features get brought into the main product. So yeah, NDI Genlock is, few people may encounter it today, but it's in there, and now it opens up these new opportunities for you.
And so all of this, though, I guess the biggest hook to all this is all these new features for the TC2 cost, I think, what was it, like $10,000, $20,000 to implement them?
Well, if you do it today, it's free. It's a free download. No, it's a permanently free download. Yeah. There's never a cost associated with it. And it's just a love letter to our users, either new or the ones who got in with us, a month ago, a year ago, to say, this product is one of the best-selling TriCasters ever, and because you guys love it and use it and want to do more with it, here you go. Here's everything you could ask for and more. Here's just one last one. We talk about in contemporary productions, especially these sort of virtual meeting rooms, green rooms have become a thing.
Yep.
Well, I can now do that on my TC2 with Live Call Connect. I can set the feed specifically that's going to Live Call Connect. So I can bring everybody into a room where I want to work with the audio and stuff up front, and then transition them over because I can control that. That's another little slick one that I think is easy to miss, because we say, well, we can control what source goes to Live Call Connect. And then once you think about what you can do with that, it becomes more apparent how powerful that is.
So I missed that in the announcement. We get that question a lot. It's like, hey, we're using the green room, or we're putting people inside rooms, right? In small meeting spaces. So that's actually huge. because being able to interact with that and prep the people, prep the content, get that stuff tested out, is pretty big. It's necessary for production, right? It's one of those things you've got.
Things are changing.
Yeah. All right. So TC2, big updates, but that wasn't all. So a whole new piece of hardware, the TC1 Pro. So talk to me. What's in this thing?
So the TC1 Pro looks at where the TC1 was and gives you a bunch of the upgrades we just talked about. So the TC1 Pro has a lot of the latest and greatest in software. The TriCaster 2 Elite was sort of a landmark. And so things like Live Call Connect and a lot of the features you talked about, neural audio, multiple stream outputs, those are all coming to the TC1 Pro. So we look at where we were with the TC1, which is this amazing NDI product, but one of the first NDI entirely based switchers. And now the TC1 Pro gains all of those features that we were just discussing, with Live Call Connect being one of the big ones, the ability to do multiple different kinds of outputs, these 4K workflows. It is that sort of step forward in a lot of ways. So we talked about the macro engine that's coming to TC1 Pro.
Nice.
We talked about multiple stream outputs. I think there's another stream output now. So you're looking at 3 stream outputs on your TC2s and your TC1s. So lots and lots of little granular features. I think the Live Call Connect and Live App Desktop are like easily the landmark guys, but neural audio on the TC1 Pro. And so if you originally had a studio that was like, man, I really want the TC1 and the TC2 has a lot of stuff I love, but I need that option because like the budget isn't right there right now. Well, from TC1 to TC1 Pro, like that's your new option. And there's going to be tons of studios where that's going to make sense. And there's going to be more and tons of opportunities where actually, you know what, TC2 makes sense for me because I need all of it. And now we sort of give you the in-between where you can have that high-level IP or that mid-level IP, and both are available as options for you.
You know, I watched a studio tried to replicate a TC2 Elite by building their own Zoom rig, and it was basically 9 servers with scan converters with all this crazy stuff to try and feed that into a baseband switcher. And I just laughed. I'm like, well, you know, you could replace all that with a TC2 and you're done. You're operating today, right? Now
and the costs on that difference, right? Like let's just there's 2 costs. There's the cost and just like how much cabling and cards and whatever that was to push. The other thing is like engineering cost. Like what's the mentality? Because there's so much to work with. Like I often talk with engineers. I'm like, would you rather troubleshoot 9x3 problems? You know, would you rather troubleshoot 27 different kinds of problems? Because is it the computer? Is it the capture? Is it the cable per caller? Like that is what drives people to get gray hairs or lose their hair because they're thinking about like, you know, how hard is this? And TC1 is just, TC2 is click a button, and you know we're good.
Well, if we think about our average school board or city councils, right? I mean, they don't always have a professional. They don't always have somebody who's bent on, you know, figuring it out, and so they need to be able to support it themselves. Is to support 9 computers versus a TC2. That's, you know, and to learn how to use it and be able to make calls with it, and it's a no-brainer in the end. Now there was one thing that was got me. Like I was like, yay, thank you. Was the TC1 Pro. You added a 10 gig Ethernet port. And I was like, oh, thank you. I mean, I know that is to some people, that's not that exciting, but to a network guy, to watching customers max out their 1 gig ports on their TC1. And I'm like, yes, now there is a pathway. So I think that's going to be an easy differentiator for, as we're talking to customers and they're saying, oh, we think a TC1's good enough. And I'm like, no, I think a TC1 Pro is going to be better. And here's why, right? when you start to deal with the massive amount of content that people want to take access to, right, and want to be able to grab onto, it's like, go with the 10 gig version, baby. It's going to help.
These guys shoot 4K. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of devices today that are 4K centric, and the fact that your TC1 Pro has a 10 gig port and uses our UDP, that new NDI5 technology that's really adaptable and really amazing at handling that high level 4K stuff, I think it's a big benefit. And the other thing, the thing I thought you were going to say is if you were a person who was always looking at getting premium access, well, the TC2 has premium access as part of the stock offering. And you may have been looking at it and been like, well, I got my TC1, or maybe I'm looking at evaluating this stuff. The TC1 Pro also comes with premium access as a stock feature. So just like lots of different features that get unlocked with cool audio workflows, these new pieces that come into the live sets, automation control. like all of these things just being a stock feature on TC1 Pro and TC2 Elite, like there's so many studios where those two, one of those two is definitely the answer. And you get to talk with great people like Nick eventually and say, here's where I'm at. Which one do I need? And the cool thing is that you're going to be working with us either way.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not that the TC1 you can't put premium access on it. It's just an additional cost. And you don't have to think about it, when the renewal comes up, when, it's just like, hey, I've got it. I've got all the features I'm ever going to need, or as they're released, I'm going to always have them. Right. It's just, it's completely wrapped up. So dude, it's spectacular. I'm really excited. Hopefully we'll be getting one of them soon. Well, I know we already updated our TC2, and Rick has been toying with all the new features and playing, and calls me every couple hours, hey, check this out. I'm like, all right, this is good. So I mean, just like we lit up Bridge, I mean, we love playing with the toys. I mean, that, because we're always like, hey Chris, how did we break this? We're trying to find ways to break it. It's fun.
I love the tech talks we have, and I'm loving watching you guys dig into it. It's the same over here. I think there's a lot of people at NewTek. My team, the sales engineer team, has actually grown. We just hired 2 new guys. So there's just like this weird, almost like childlike glee in getting the new stuff. And I think, that is so essential and important to the creative and intellectual process these days, is when we get these NDI tools, we kind of want to stretch them to the limits. I mean, I don't know. I'm just going to say this because no one gates me on this stuff. I was trying to do an esports workflow with the 3P2, where what if I put quadrants of 1080 video and turned a 3P2, which is an 8-channel replay, into a 32-channel replay by leveraging the fact that I could do pan and scan on each input. Because I was like, how can I break this? The same concept you're talking about. I was like, I'm going to push this thing to the limit because I'm crazy. Esports has super high demands. What if you could do all the replay on one machine, and just do quadrants? And actually, it works if you don't care about the game audio. Like, you could do what I just said and set your macros up, and you could be technically recording more feeds than it says, but you do have to sacrifice that audio workflow today. So we love that stuff too. We love tinkering and getting the tools and saying, sky's the limit. Like, let's go nuts with it.
So that's so funny. Is we had a client who did a review lab where they basically did split screen, same concept, put multiple images on one screen, recorded those, and then Rick built a macro so they could just hit a button and zoom in to the one feed they wanted to see. Yeah, and then just kind of push in, push out, push in, push out. And it was just that same concept. But these are the fun things, right? It's like, how can we use this in a non-conventional way? You don't get as many choices like that when you go to pure hardware-based switchers, because it's purpose-built to do it one way only. And it's like, now we've got the ability, okay, well, this is software. Let's tweak it. Let's adjust it. Let's try and come up with new use cases that solve other people's problems.
We think about it exactly the same way with our software development. And when we sit down, I had the luxury, literally a one-time experience with the organization. A bunch of the sales engineers actually got to sit in San Antonio with a lot of the major keys to what happens in new tech development. And we were able to have very earnest conversations about, how are we going to evolve and iterate? And it's what's so unique about that, sitting in with that and listening to these people from all over the world who all play a part in all of this. The conversation isn't as direct as some of our industry talks. We would talk with people very directed to the industry, like you're talking about the progress of hardware, well, hey, this is the next thing we got to talk about, right? The conversation was so forward thinking. No topic that was going to be like majorly implemented in NDI was something that's just like a simple analog to what someone else was doing. Everything we're looking for is forward facing in such a way of like, not how do we tackle existing workflows? How do we redefine and enable the new workflows of tomorrow? I think of things immediately like the growth of these what would we call them, like almost like meme apps, like TikTok. Like, there is a huge audience on that platform, and like, how do you interact with that? Well, like the conversations that were had in that room, that was one of them, but like that was the ilk of like not just thinking about, well, what do we do about Dante in the world? Like, those conversations are, we play with all the IP partners. We love what all those guys are doing. We're going to continue to look way forward in the future and say, how do we continue to be a trendsetter and on the cutting edge? And I think when you get involved with us, we talk about the TC1 Pro and the TC2, you're more than just getting that product. You're really getting this like entire cutting edge mindset, And that is what you get when you're dealing with NDI as well. So it is like been so amazing to be at Viz Group for this time and really like watch this maturation over the years.
Not gonna lie, I'm jealous. I want to be in that room with you next time. I was just to watch. Where is it going next? Too much fun. Hey, listen, man, it's been spectacular having you on. Thank you. I appreciate it. Please make room in your calendar to do this again, because what I love about this is there's always new things every month. There's new changes, new ideas coming out, new workflows. So we need to make sure this is a regular occasion between us, so we can keep these conversations going. All right, this has been a great conversation, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. As always, folks, if you have questions on the products, reach out to NewTek, reach out to us. You can hit Chris Burgos at cburgos@newtek.com. He's always available to answer questions all hours of the night. Trust me. I'm just kidding, Chris. Or you can reach out to us at Exertis. We're happy to answer questions. The URL will be at the bottom of the screen, because if I get it wrong one more time, my producer is going to smack me in the back of the head. And we're going to call this episode of the Exertis Broadcast Podcast over and out.